Our next question comes from a viewer named Jen. And Jen says, I feel I am called by God to those who are likely to have a premature death due to opiate addiction, heroin being the main culprit. My question to Lynn Life is this. I feel called to be humble, sacrificial, for the sake of saving these sectors of society. These humans are treated like garbage, spit on and used, the forgotten people, overcome by a brain disease induced by a horrible substance. I was confused by this video. Is it wrong to save lives that would otherwise end in an early grave since the earth is too crowded? Do the angels have any opinion on this?
Someone is coming over and they're talking about what it means to be a good person.
Yeah, they are.
And that being a good person means doing things that are not necessarily good for us as individuals, but that are helpful to some greater collective. And they're talking about how it's really difficult for many humans to relate to anything other than humans.
That's
and how helpful it can be to do something for others. And if you feel called to help heroin addicts, then help heroin addicts, and maybe help them when they get their act together to go out and do something for the planet, and maybe at least start to preach the gospel of contraception, because it's really, really, really time for us to change our mindsets about procreation and about death and about life. But let's just start with this procreation thing. It's
That's
just
true.
taken as a part of life, a natural part of life, and many people don't really even decide to have children. They just kind of do it without thought and passively.
That's
and
true.
it's such it should be such a major commitment that it sounds a little demented to make such a major commitment in such a flippant fashion. It should not be a frivolous or flippant choice, but when we start to engage in the conversation regarding contraception, we find that almost nobody has thought about it at all.
That's true.
They just assume that they will have kids. When I have children, it's just kind of an assumption as something that one does in order to be an adult.
Yeah.
Kind of like getting a driver's license.
Yes.
And yet we see in urban areas where public transportation is readily available, there are many young people who don't get driver's licenses, and so quite obviously it isn't actually a rite of passage.
That's true.
And the same could be said for having children. And when the ideal range of humanity is given the way that we like to live comfortably in a way that's reasonably destructive to the environment.
That's true.
There need to be fewer of us, and therefore we really need to bring humanity's population down to somewhere between 500 million and 2 billion. All that having been said, when we turn around and help someone, it is good for us and gets us heading in the right direction. And so a career that is a selfless career, where you're actually sacrificing and helping people who are actually struggling, can be very good for the soul. And so go ahead and do that, but don't get trapped there. And consider that once you get these people out of the gutter, to head them in a direction that will be helpful for the planet.
That's true.
Don't just get them out of the gutter so that they can go get a job at Verizon or something like that.
That's
Get
true.
them out of the gutter so that they can go forth and serve us to the planet. That's one way to think about it.
That's true. You know what someone in that higher dimension room is saying about heroin addicts? He's saying, Jen, I don't know if you've thought about this, but the something that heroin addicts have that not everybody has is that they've already been living on the fringes of what society expects them to do. You know, they've already kind of kicked off a lot of expectations by living the life of a heroin addict, and so they might even be more open to living the alternative lifestyles that we're talking about here.
And really what we're coming up on is an era where it's time to rise up.
And that's the point.
And there are fine organizations. One example is Extinction Rebellion. And maybe get your heroin addicts out of the gutter and train them to be willing to pull a Charles Darnay.
That's what they're talking
Charles
about.
Darnay from A Tale of Two Cities. It is a far, far better thing I do than I have ever done.
Before.
And so to maybe get the heroin addicts to become rebels for the cause of the planet. There's a strong need for that. Excellent point. Thank you. Does this answer the question?
I don't hear anybody else.
I don't hear anybody else. Okay.
Our next question comes from an anonymous viewer, and he says, I have a question. If you look into the chemical DMT that ayahuasca released into the body, it is a chemical that releases in the brain during physical death. Why? Why is this? Do you think an angelic presence can answer this question?
The detangling motion is being made and
I
saying
feel that motion.
it's possible that the actual question is, what is the link between ayahuasca, which is something that shamans have used to journey into the less dense dimensions?
That's true.
What is the link between that and what happens in death? And the chemicals that ayahuasca induces definitely do allow somebody to transcend into the astral dimensions. That's how the shamans were doing it. That's how the shamans are getting upstairs the same way, using the same chemicals that somebody would use in a death experience. We're still getting upstairs. But the point is that the upstairs, the astral dimensions, are now exceedingly dangerous places, and they're dangerous even for the dead. And the dead don't have as much choice as the living do. The living can choose to stay out of those dangerous places. It's like if you're living in a city and there's a part of town that is deteriorating rapidly and all the businesses are shutting down and the heroin addicts are setting up on the corner and there goes the neighborhood, right? And so to consider that that is exactly what's going on in the astral dimensions, and then to consider very carefully whether or not you want to be journeying there. And often when the people who are still in bodies show up upstairs in a drug trip, they are not showing up oriented, and they are not showing up with divine protection.
That feels true.
They're showing up on their own in a very lawless area, and it's like getting off the interstate in Liberty City in Miami. Don't get off the interstate in Liberty City. Don't do that. Drive a couple exits more before you stop for gas. Just don't do it.
That's what that higher presence is saying.
Yes. Somebody up there is marveling at how the theme of drugs is weaving through all these questions. And he's saying, what is going on down there? What is going on down there? Do you people do anything other than drugs?
That's exactly what he's saying. And now he's kind of pacing around the room.
This is what's happening, friends. We've been telling you this for so long. This is what's happening. Everybody's drugged. It's drugs. It's 7.7 billion drugged zombies.
That's true.
Kind of like living on a planet of the undead.
Yes.
This is what we've been telling you. That was a boots on the ground soul. I don't know who that was, but it's a very familiar tone.
That's true.
Somebody who's been here submitting reports, and the reports just get ignored.
Yeah, that's true.
They don't want to talk about drugs no more.
No.
They don't want to talk about drugs anymore.
No.
They feel like...
They said, we're done with these questions about drugs.
That's
There's hands being thrown in the air.
Yes, that's what they say. And the little person is saying, I'm telling you, everybody's on drugs. You're going to have to deal with the fact that everybody's on drugs. It's a planet of addicts. For him is the message. And why do you ask?
Wow.
Whew, that goes up.
Yeah, it does. Our next question comes from a viewer named Jabeen. And Jabeen says...
I don't think that's really his name or her name.
It's very possible that it is not his name.
Anonymous.
It could be an anonymous viewer. I accept that. This is the name we have been given.
All right.
Jabeen says, "Hi, Lynn and Jamie.
Hi, Jabeen.
I have a question.
Yes.
What do you and the wiser minds think about adoption? I think I would like to be a dad later in life, and was thinking of going down the adoption route."
Well, we notice that Jabeen is asking 3 presences, and so Lynn thinks that there are children who have a very hard time getting a place to grow, where they are loved, and that these children have problems. The problem-free kids get snapped up
right away,
and what's left are the children who have disabilities.
That's true.
Or who have come out of the foster care system and they have been so abused for so many years that they're seriously messed up.
That's true.
And those are the kids who actually need homes. And if you're looking to provide a service to the planet, that is one, and you want to be a parent,
that's true.
then that is one beautiful way to be of service.
That's true.
That's what Lynn thinks.
And you know what Jamie thinks is, even if you were just thinking about it from a purely selfish perspective, I think that the good karma that someone would get from taking in one of those kids, the ones who are a little older and have been a little bit beaten around and nobody's been good to, I think that the good karma that you could get from that would way offset any kind of bad karma from having a child, even if I was just a big presence upstairs looking for someone to dump bad karma into. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like the difference between taking in Baxter, who's 5 years old and quite got some issues to work through, as opposed to getting a little puppy who comes free of those troubles.
Exactly.
Everybody wants the little puppy. What about Baxter?
What about Baxter? A guy who's got some issues.
He's got some issues.
And that's what I think. And now asking way up there.
What about adoption?
Somebody in that higher dimension room who may or may not know Jabeen personally, what they're saying is, you know, it really comes down to the soul plan, because here are some options. Some people have these soul plans that in order to do them, having a child of any kind, if it's biological or adoptive or what have you, would throw you off track, slow you way down, and then make it impossible for you to do what you were born to do. And in that case, adoption would be a really, really bad way to go. If you were born to do something that children would throw off track. He's saying it really comes down to the soul plan, and there is no one right answer for anybody on this question.
Somebody else is saying, because we see all these presences looking at each other with kind of stunned looks on their faces.
Stunned.
And they're saying, it seems as though there's some kind of fundamental disconnect and unawareness of what all the scientific projections are showing.
That's
saying,
what they're
do you
talking
guys
about.
not get that things are not going to be the same in a reasonably short period of time? Be that 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years.
You guys on planet Earth.
Right here, you guys on planet Earth. Humans, ground zero, planet Earth, right here. within a reasonably short period of time, this is going to start coming apart at the seams.
Yeah.
And that this is scientific consensus, mainstream scientific consensus. And all you have to do is look at science and look at history and blend the two together and say, all right, with this level of destruction headed our way, what does history say is going to be the likely outcome? And history says the likely outcome is collapse of social structures, collapse of civilizations. It's not going to be the same. And so all these questions that are being asked about things like adoption in the future, we really need to say, your frames of reference are going to be changing, and they're going to be changing.
It's that same presence in that higher dimension room. He's got the microphone now.
Yeah, they're going to be changing in a reasonably short period of time, be that 2 to 10 years, 2 to 10 years is how it feels.
That presence doesn't feel like it's more than 10 years.
No, he doesn't feel that it's more than 10 years. And so to start to consider other skills. How can I learn skills that will be more relevant in that kind of world?
That's true.
How can I be of service to myself and the world around me in that kind of world? And we know that this is inconvenient information, but this is extremely mainstream science.
That's true.
This is mainstream science. If you just look at the UN reports, I'm going to butcher the acronym, but the IIPC report or something like that, where they're just saying basically, friends, here it comes. We have missed the window of opportunity. The destruction is upon us. We're more than halfway through murdering all other life. The soil is breaking down. The ability to raise food is diminishing. When food goes, chaos ensues. Assume that that's what's headed our way. Let's stop pretending that things are going to continue like this, because that's unlikely. True. It's just not likely. I'm sorry. There's some little girl, some little Swedish girl,
Greta
and she
something.
Talked to the UN and to the EU, and you should, Greta something, Thunberg or something. She's just a little,
we can link to it,
15-year-old girl who has reached the point of saying it's so insane that we're all pretending that our societies are going to continue when they so obviously aren't.
That's true.
And she has said, I'm not going to go to school anymore to learn things that are useless. I'm going to protest for this. And it's like Joan of Arc,
That's
like a
true.
modern Joan of Arc. And to the young people, we could say, be the modern Joans of Arc, or the Johns of Arc.
That's
be
true.
the Jean or Joans of Arc. And what that means is to be somebody who stands up and says, look, we've got to change things.
That's true.
Does this answer the question? They just look
Flummoxed.
stunned at the questions. It's like, how can these possibly be the questions that humanity is asking?
Whereas that soul who's been here on planet Earth, who's looking up at them, feels like, I've been sending reports with these exact questions for a really long time.
For like 10 years, 20 years, this is what I've been saying.
It's kind of embarrassing that you're surprised.
Right. It's very important for those of us in the denser end of this interdimensional connection to remember that they do not have to help us.
Very true.
You know how much bargaining power we have, friends? 0, 0, exactly none, none, none. No bargaining power. It's important to be grateful. Gratitude counts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. They're just buffaloed. It's like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
I understand. I agree.